People that have a fake degree or bought their degree online, how did your life turn out? What's your story? Story 1. So in the mid-1990s, I knew this guy among a group of friends who completely faked his IT certs and college degree. We all knew it, but because he knew buzzwords and applied a certain charm, he managed to land some amazing six-figure IT architect jobs. His only previous experience was retail sales at Egghead Software. The first thing he did was start taking advantage of the company's free training and educational assistance. Eventually, he got some actual certification, and over the years, a real college degree, under the guise he was updating his training in an ever-changing market. During these years, he changed jobs a few times, taking advantage of company buyouts, layoffs, severance packages, poor HR communication, and other ways to game the system. Each change, he listed the former company in his employment history and a mixture of fake education and real certs. By the early 2000s, he legitimately had all the stuff he needed to get a high-level top-secret clearance IT security job right after 9/11. Not sure what he's doing now. I used to be mad, but now I just think that's amazing. One thing mentioned is diploma mills, but did you know there are employment mills? There are fake companies you pay some fee to have them say, "Yes, he worked for us for 7 years as a project manager. He was awesome." I see this more in India and Eastern Europe than America, but I'm sure a lot of companies here have unwittingly hired someone who paid a few grand for these services. Story 2. A friend of mine dropped out of our college junior year and made a copy of my diploma with his name on it. Since he works in theater, it doesn't seem like his fake degree in history has helped or hurt him. More of a conversation piece at this point, since experience trumps all in theater. However, one of my coworkers at a startup was discovered to have a fake degree when we were acquired, and the large company did a background investigation on all technical staff. He said he had a degree in computer science from U of M. He was a fine programmer, better than me, but he was fired immediately. His girlfriend also left him, so that didn't work out super well for him. He's now taken a job, but the story has gotten out, and he was forced to accept a much lower paying position than he had before. My advice, for what it's worth, is that it serves little purpose. Eventually, you'll get caught by an employer. It's becoming more common to check, and colleges will confirm if you graduated or not, especially for technical degrees where your salary can greatly be determined by the degree you have and where you got it from. But for an English or history degree, since it doesn't really help getting a job, go for it. Saves you thousands of dollars. But be ready to get caught. I'm sure the likelihood of getting caught is pretty dependent on the job itself. I really can't imagine most grunt jobs, or even a lot of middle-class positions, are concerned with anything but experience and skill. That said, if you want a job that pays super well, lying to get there is a phenomenally bad idea. The guy in the first story had the right idea by immediately using his paycheck to start legitimizing his claims. But if you aren't doing that, there's no point. What are you going to do with the extra money? If your secret becomes known, do you want to be living in a home you can't afford without the job you just lost? The extra money will be fun for a while, but having it ripped out from under you could be devastating. Story 3. I unwittingly faked a degree for several years, and it was discovered during a background check when I was making a big career move. Basically, got offered a job offer with a much higher rate of pay and full payment to cover a cross-country move. And I accepted because I was in a bad situation at the time and wanted to use this as a way out. After I resigned and packed everything I owned, the HR lady called to tell me there was a problem. It seemed I didn't have the degree I was claiming. I called the school and they researched it, but the job was about to renege on their offer since it all seemed shady, and they were already on the hook for a couple of grand just to relocate us. Turns out I never paid the filing fee, which was eliminated the year I left. The clerk typed a few lines into her computer, and suddenly I had a degree. It amazed me that I'd gotten the jobs I'd gotten with such a blatant lie on my resume. I assume everyone checks everything now that the internet makes it so easy. But then again, I assumed everyone was checking everything before too. Story 4. The head of computer science department of my college had just a bachelor's degree from a cruddy university of a different state in India. But when he came to the college for the vacancy, he had brought forged papers saying he had a master's, a PhD, and another master's in philosophy. Apparently, the college management was delighted when a person of such great qualifications from out of state came in and promptly put him in charge. He knew nothing of systems, nor has even worked in a Linux environment. He refused to hold staff meetings and cashed out all the academic leaves that he could get. He got paid like 1.2 million rupees a month, which is pretty huge in India. He stayed for around a year and a half total. One day, the bursar called him for something entirely unrelated, and he panicked. He left the college immediately, leaving the forged certificates behind. The college launched an investigation and found out that he was a fake. College hushed it up to prevent a PR disaster. When I said that whether you get caught probably depends on the job you're applying for, I assumed it would go without saying that you probably shouldn't try to pull this trick with an actual college. If anyone's going to check, you'd think it would be them. So it's actually pretty incredible that this worked for any length of time. It's sort of ironic. On one hand, I can't believe the guy even managed to get a bachelor's if he was dumb enough to think this would work, and yet it did. Kinda makes you wonder what kind of degrees the management had at that school. I like to picture their entire board was full of distinguished-looking men who all got their doctorates in underwater basket weaving. Story 5. Not me, but a buddy of mine. His brother went to Taiwan to teach English, and since my buddy had nothing going on in his life, he decided to follow him over there a few years later. He never finished community college, but all the schools there required a BS or above. So he did what any self-respecting man would do. He forged a master's in education from a state school in Photoshop. He's been teaching English in Taiwan for almost 8 years now, has 3 schools he regularly teaches at, K through 5, and also privately tutors for a few rich Taiwanese adults. Oh, he's also there on a 90-day tourist visa, so every 3 months he has to leave the country for at least 1 week to be able to renew his visa. So he takes 1 to 3 week vacations every 3 months. He's been all over Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, etc. He has a small house on the beach in a rural city, has a hot girlfriend, a dog, and works 5-hour days, 4 days a week, making great money. It turned out pretty dang well for him. Making great money as a teacher? Not that I expected Taiwan to be anything like America, but a well-paid teacher might be literally the most foreign concept I've ever heard of in my life. Story 6. Guy at the university that I worked at faked a degree, became assistant vice president of university, basically person in charge of day-to-day operations of the university that weren't related to academics, scams the university out of $1.2 million, we think it was more, through various invoicing schemes. University finds discrepancies, fires him, pays him about $755,000 in severance package, then calls police and has him charged with fraud, along with a number of other people. Tries to sue him for the severance package. University loses lawsuit as they gave him the money, suspecting what he had done, instead of phoning police. On top of that, he managed to beat the criminal charges as well. Story 7. My sister had a colleague for a while at a big international bank who worked there with a high school diploma in working with fancy horses, dressage or something like that. The job required you to have at least a bachelor's degree. Management thought that everyone who would apply for the job would also meet the requirements, so they didn't bother checking what kind of degree she actually had. She was hired based on her motivation/personality. She worked there for about a year, doing a really good job apparently, before it was discovered and she was forced to look for another job. Completely the fault of the one responsible for hiring her, instead of her using a fake degree, but I thought it was relevant. I'm sorry, she had a high school diploma in dressage? How is that a real thing? I know there are private schools that let you have a major. I thought they were usually performing arts schools, where your major would be something like theater, vocal performance, or creative writing. And I guess it doesn't surprise me there are schools where you can pick other majors, but you can't possibly expect me to believe there's a high school made exclusively for horse girls. That's the most made-up sounding thing I've ever heard. In fact, I'm Googling this right now just to prove... Oh my god, there are 3 in my area alone. Story 8. I taught English overseas from 2002 to 2005. Our school grew from one of the smallest in the city to one of the largest in that time. When I started, I was the only foreign teacher, and then they promoted me to head teacher and asked me to hire others. The ironic thing was they actually had education. Life was good, booze was cheap, friends were plentiful. Then I had to move back home because immigration started cracking down on that stuff. So I traveled the world and now do a rotten day job. But at least I'm happy pursuing art and acting. Story 9. There's a story my dad was telling me of this lady that was an engineer in a lead position for like 20 years before they found out that she didn't actually have a degree. She was terminated shortly after. Happened in Houston a few years back, but I can't remember what position specifically that she held. She lived in Houston. Did she play intramural horse sports in high school? Because apparently they have a place for that there. Story 10. I dropped out halfway through a 2-year course in IT. I stuck it on my CV anyway early on in my career, and one day an interviewer asked for a copy. Photoshop and running the printout through a photocopier saved my bacon and got me the job. It ended up being a crap job that I left after a year. Though I didn't get caught, I'd never do it again. Maybe it was the stress and worry it caused. Perhaps I have more integrity these days. But it's easier to have integrity when you have a boatload of experience and professional certifications. Story 11. I'm a teacher, and this year I had an NQT, newly qualified, start working with me. She was beyond terrible, and I voiced my concerns from the start. One day she was called into the office and just disappeared, after working at the school for over a month. Turns out she wasn't qualified. How she got that far without being checked, I will never know. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 12. I got my high school diploma from Sally Struthers. It did me absolutely no good. I did all these workbooks and wrote essays and all the usual high school jazz, but it happens that after I finished, I found out that it isn't accredited in the state that I lived in. Ended up taking the GED. I feel like there are some youngsters who won't understand this, so let me explain. Sally Struthers is an actress known mostly for her sitcom work, mainly All in the Family. She does not own a high school, but in the 90s, she did TV commercials for International Correspondence Courses, a company that would help you get your diploma by mail. You could also get a degree in business or accounting, as well as continued education in a variety of subjects, including VCR repair, childcare, and apparently even bricklaying, the latter two of which sound like the kind of things you really ought to learn by doing. They additionally offered a course called Learning the Personal Computer, which sounds funny now, but was probably useful for some people back in 1992. In any case, most colleges, and even some jobs, won't recognize a diploma from an unaccredited school. I guess that's the only part that some people might have needed, but the history lesson seemed more fun. Story 13. My dad's company faked a degree for him. He's a programmer, and he helped start this company with these two fancy business people who couldn't deal with the fact that he'd gone to college and not graduated. One day, my dad looked at the company website, and it said he had a degree from the place he'd gone. Then later in the day, one of his employees came in and said he was supposed to instruct my dad in how to lie and say he had a degree, and what degree he had. They even got him a fake diploma. The worst part is that most of his employees didn't have degrees. They just couldn't deal with an executive not having one. Story 14. I have an undergrad degree from Caltech. It is a real degree at one of the best schools in the world. But I cheated. Caltech has take-home exams for everything, and I paid a guy to do mine for all 4 years. I'm an engineer that knows nothing of thermodynamics, body mechanics, heat transfer, fluid phenomena, calculus, etc. Story 15. Well, I worked at a prestigious law firm for a year or two and made quite a name for myself. Unfortunately, one of my coworkers, this spineless idiot trying to make partner, turned me into the state bar behind my back, so I had to leave the firm and get a real degree. I enrolled at a local community college, so I could meet the bare minimums without doing much work. But I ended up in a study group with a bunch of interesting characters, while trying to sleep with this cute blonde in my Spanish class. 5 years of hijinks later, I'm a teacher at the school, and the group is still around. For the most part, anyway. Shame about that meteor that's about to hit the place, but hey, at least it was here. Okay, I have to admit that I didn't initially get this. I was about to moralize about the OP calling his coworker spineless when he's the one who lied his way into a job. But it was pretty clear near the end that he's talking about community. What wasn't as clear was the meteor. I couldn't remember having seen a meteor on the show, besides maybe the cookie wand. What I forgot was that Reddit loves to reference itself as much as possible. So for anyone who got the community reference, but not the meteor bit, it's just referring to a post that used a meteor hitting the school as a metaphor for the show's cancellation. The more you know. Story 16. Not really a fake degree, but I do have a lot more automotive repair experience on my resume than I really do. I have more than enough experience and knowledge for my line of work to be safe and responsible, but I could have never landed my current job without stretching that truth. Story 17. My friend paid for a degree from some random online school. He wrote exactly 3 very bad one-page papers, never had anything to study, no other assignments, etc., was immediately hired by Chevron doing middle management, and makes $60,000 a year. Still doesn't know the difference between there, and there. Story 18. Been lying about my degree for about 2 or 3 years. No one has ever checked. It's in a very high-pressure, high-profile industry. In reality, I was a terrible student and partied way too much. One reporter worth anything could finish me. But journalism apparently ceased to exist long ago. Whatever. Party on, Wayne. Story 19. My ex faked a degree from London School of Economics. Was managing director of several Fortune 100 companies. Currently CEO of a Fortune 500, number 2 in their area. Narcissist, sociopath, generally a really not very nice guy who most people would find charming and likable upon first meeting. But I digress. One can only hope it catches up with him. Story 20. A good friend of mine did one of those ridiculously expensive online degrees. He paid a Russian to do a large majority of the degree. Story 21. I had a 12-year programming career on the back of my AA in humanities that I conferred on myself for reading a lot. Nobody ever looked or even asked until, ironically, I went after a side job teaching programming at a local notorious technology diploma mill. It's an accredited school, but it's fairly well known that it's BS. Anyway, they made it clear they would be sending away for transcripts, and I fessed up and told them my resume was BS, because I didn't really give a dang about the job. It was a lark. They hired me anyway. I was the most knowledgeable programming instructor they had. The place was so depressing, I quit after the semester. I do rather love the idea of a diploma mill sending out for transcripts. I also love that a programmer chose to lie about his degree, and he chose humanities as his major. Humanities feels like one of those majors that you literally only choose if you plan to teach humanities. It's such a ridiculous choice for someone who wants to go into programming that I'd actually wager the earlier jobs didn't factor it into their hiring decision at all. I've never applied for a programming job before, but it seems like the kind of thing where they would test you out to see if you have any real skill. Apparently, this OP did. Story 22. I used a fake degree and fake resume for a high-profile translation job. Next thing I know, I'm on stage next to U.S. President Obama, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I just started improvising my own sign language. People tell me I made a gigantic goof out of my entire nation. But this was in South Africa, and I have schizophrenia too, so pretty much to be expected. I literally can't tell if this is a bigger slam against schizophrenics or South Africans, but feel free to share your thoughts on that in the comments. Story 23. I may as well have a fake degree because I don't remember shinola from college. Story 24. I teach at an international school in Shanghai. I have a master's degree in education. Guy I work with faked his bachelor's degree, and we have the same job. Seems to be working for him. For now. Story 25. Well, I don't have a fake degree, but I have a GED, and people tell me it's like a fake high school diploma. Story 26. I once interviewed a woman for an executive-level management position. She had an online master's in the field and expected the job based solely on that merit. When asked about her experience within the career, she had none. When asked about her learnings in these courses, she had none. I thanked her for her time. I felt bad because she apparently went into serious debt expecting to pay it off immediately. Wait, so she had a real degree. I feel like we need to know a lot more about this interview for this story to really land. If you ask a lot of people what they learned in college, they might clam up and not really have a great answer because it's such a broad question. But if you ask for specifics, you might get a totally different response. For instance, if you yourself are qualified, you should have an idea what some of the required courses for the major would be, the kind you'd learn about regardless of the specific school. You can use that as a springboard to figure out how attentive they were. If this OP didn't do that, then the problem wasn't the woman's lack of knowledge, it was the OP's utter lack of hiring skills. Then again, I guess there's a chance it's both. Story 27. There was a high-ranking official from the Department of Homeland Security who was dismissed for using a fake degree. Homeland Security. Degree verification is rare. Many HR people do not verify. Story 28. Anyone know where I can find a website that sells fake degrees? Not that I'm going to purchase one. Now that would be silly. Story 29. Did not complete a 2-year college program for food service management. Put it on resume anyway. Nobody ever asked. Worked for 3 years at $22 an hour. Story 30. Got an online DD degree just to tick off my wife's ex, who's a preacher. I insist he call me doctor. For those who don't know, DD means Doctor of Divinity. I don't know how it works online, but a real degree requires you to have peer-reviewed publication history, and even for an online degree, you have to pay. I get why this is meant to be funny, but throwing money at a worthless degree just to stick it to your wife's ex feels maybe just a touch insecure. Then again, this thread is mostly for people who couldn't get jobs without lying through their teeth. So maybe I came to the wrong place to find well-adjusted people. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.